All right, I was going to show first how to create a hello world using Android Studio Kotlin. You can see I have in front of me the Android Studio welcome project screen. Welcome to Android Studio. First, you want to click Start a new Android project Studio project. The application name. Hello world. Company domain. You can put in your full name .example.com, or we'll do this semester. So it better be the same. Let's just do student.rvc.edu. Make sure Kotlin support is checked. Click Next. On the phone and tablet support, select the highest you have here. Right now I've got up to, notice it goes all the way up to 27. 26 is Oreo. And it also tells you when you select this, notice it says since it's a newer OS, newer update, it says it'll only run on less than 1% of devices. If we go down further to say, like I had earlier, something like KitKat will do 90% of your devices. You have to remember Android, multiple versions out there. Like for this one, KitKat will be fine. Next, select Empty Studio. Next, we'll leave the main activity and layout name the same. Click Finish. It's going to go ahead and build your Gradle, which is resolving all builds, getting your initial code ready. If you get any unregistered prompts like this, just ignore them. Okay, first thing I want to mention is the app side here. To get to the screen to where the application's running, you're going to go over here to the app side, res, layout, and double click on the activity main.xml. And you'll notice when it loads, it's loading in the default app screen, which is hello world for the title and the label. So we're going to change the title to the name, your first name and last name, and then the label will be hello world from RVC. So in order to do that, you'll notice here at the bottom of the layout, there's Design tab and Text tab, Design and Text. So in order to change this label here, we can double click on it and change it, or I like to do it within the code, which is going to the text view here and type in finish up RVC. That's the actual text referring to right here. You'll notice as I typed it, the changes were made. Now this text up here is a little different because it's going to be gotten and created another place and updated another place. Go ahead and do a Command S if you're on a Mac or Control S on a Windows machine. Go back to the Design tab. And so in order to get to the, we need to come, when the app loaded, one of them that loaded was this on manifest, the Android manifest.xml. Double click on that. And you'll notice in the application section, there's a number of items that are settings for the app, like allowing backup, icon, the initial label at the top that were changed, the icon here, supports all different variations of moving the app and vertical, horizontal, and main activity. So we're going to override this label, even though right now it says hello world. you'll notice it's coming from the app name, which is Hello World. So we're just going to literally, in the quotes there, change it to the first and last name. Go ahead and do a save. Save all. Now notice when we go back to the activity main.xml, it has not yet updated. So close out of this activity main.xml, go back in and open it up, and then you should see the change. On this side of your screen, as far as navigation goes for Android Studio, on the left is the files, as we've been going over. The middle here, the next section is tools, from all layouts like buttons, labels, radio boxes, progress bars, browsers, date related, Google related, whole bunch of hundreds and hundreds of tools you can use in Android Studio. Down here, as you click on each one, it's going to show you, or you can right click on them or just left click on them. You're just selecting the item. You go over here on the left, it gives you the different categories of items in your tool palette. And here in the middle is the canvas, and you'll notice it will select up here the target device it's going to run on. Be a Nexus 4. And shows that by a little checkbox right there. .27 is a version of Android that's being used. App themes default, we'll leave that as is. Language is default, leave that as is. Now we're ready to compile and run it. So if you go up here to the build menu, one thing I like to do after making changes is doing a clean project and a rebuild project. So we'll go to build clean. And down here at the bottom of Android Studio, you'll see that it's doing its work. Once it's finished, it'll show us here. It'll stop spinning. It'll say Gradle is finished. Took 12 seconds. Now we'll go up here to build again and rebuild project. And just make this a good habit of cleaning, rebuilding every time you make a change or every time you open the app to start working on it. Just takes a few seconds to do. Time to execute. Well, it's still executing, but it shouldn't take any time to do it. That's finished before you do anything. And again, it's at the bottom here where it says Gradle build running. Gradle build running. Keep that in view. That way you know when it's done. We try to run things while this is indexing and running. It's going to make errors. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and run the app. There's a little play button here where it says run app, or you can do an R, Command R. So go ahead and hit the play button. It tells you the device it's connected to, in this case, the Nexus. Click OK. And notice here at the bottom, it says it's executing the Gradle build, installing the APK, which is the executable that runs. And you should also see on the bottom of your computer the emulator with the finished product. Now, when it's the first time it runs this emulator, it's going to be pretty slow. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this one to restart it again. So notice I'm getting rid of this emulator, and rerunning it again just to show you what it looks like from scratch. When you exit out of it, like I just did by clicking on the menu and exiting out, it's going to save or do a screenshot or attempt to do a screenshot of that menu or of that phone where it was at the time. Again. And I already created a Nexus 5 in there, it's fine. The device here is where you click on it to create, which we'll do later. And then go and click OK. Go back to the 4.7, so it looks like I did not have that emulator installed. Click run, and create new device. Here's a Nexus 4, which it looks like I do not have that installed. I'm going to select it. Click next. Click next. Finish it. And there's a Nexus 4 now available. If you get a prompt about performing a clean boot or snapshot, just dismiss that. You should get a Gradle completed finished prompt. The phone will start like mine's doing here, the emulator phone, which I just installed a Nexus 4. I had a Nexus 5 on. Let it go through its install process, which can take a little bit. The first time, I had initially before this podcast had mine set to Nexus 5, which during the setup of this project, I changed to Nexus 4. And so I had installed Nexus 4, which, as you saw, only took a few seconds to do. Keeping updates while this is running, talk about that for a second. Keep your updates on Android Studio updated. I would update daily in Android Studio just so it doesn't accumulate. And so updating Android Studio is vital to getting the newest and greatest code base, and then also making sure that bug fixes or anything that might be in especially newer releases. Still compiling here. Still moving here, it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and pause the podcast and come back. Oh, no, I won't. Looks like it's going now. Almost there. And in Android Studio, to check for updates, you'll go to the Help menu and go and select Updates to configure your IDE. You can even configure it to update automatically. And there's finally the app completed and running on the phone. Later at the bottom, if I click this, it's going to refresh and go back to the home page. If I click up on this little arrow here, It takes you to all the apps on the phone that are installed. And since it's a base model, you'll have all the default plus the one that you just created. There's mine there, the Chuck Conkle. This one here, again, takes you back to the home page as well. This one here brings up a snapshot of all the apps running. And you can click on the X to stop it. All right, and that completes the tutorial for Hello World, your very first application in Android Studio. And I did want to end with the updates on your device. You go to the Help menu. And they'd move these around sometimes. There we go, Android Studio menu on the Mac. It's on the Android Studio menu instead of Help. And check for updates. And right now it tells me it's ready for an update, which I'm not going to do right now on this podcast. The other thing you can do is go to Android Studio if you have a Mac, Android Studio menu and go to Preferences. Make sure on the Android Studio Preferences, on the system settings, here's where you can go into making sure that, like for instance, on the closing of the tool menu, ask if you really wanted to do that. That way it doesn't close all the way out. And then last, make sure Kotlin compiler is in here. So again, confirming Android Studio updates, Android Studio check for updates and run them daily. And that concludes the podcast.